Good morning. Greetings to all friends and family. Um, I am recording this more or less on the Italian frontier and on the Swiss border. I wanted to start talking about, so I've had a lot of friends ask, what is it like as an expat? And having left America, and what are the ins and outs? And it's never leaving a place, home, especially like in my case, I was born in LA. So, heading out when you're 60 years old to a whole new life, it ain't easy, and it's not for the faint of heart. But it's an incredible adventure. And I've grown in so many ways and calmed in so many ways, and I guess hopefully have, through mistakes, gotten wiser in many ways. And so I wanted to talk about, if you guys are interested, or anybody, because God knows I certainly miss my friends, and if more Americans feel like making the trek, I'd say go for it. So this is really intended for anybody that's considering leaving the U.S. For me, it was California, and kind of helping you make it as painless as possible, or at least just answering questions as I can. First and foremost, you kind of need to find a place to land, right? Like where do you feel most comfortable? In my case, I had already had some lots of friends and business dealings in Switzerland, so that became important, kind of as kind of a career base, if you will, or a base. But I discovered, and I felt really comfortable myself in more Latin and more Mediterranean cultures. So Italy, Spain, Portugal. Fortunately, even before COVID, Southern Europe really, they don't have a big birth rate, right? So a lot of retirees and a lot of people getting older, so they need fresh blood, if you will. So there are a lot of incentives to make it easier. I chose Portugal because of all the incentives they had, because I liked the family-based culture, really. And I had met friends there that helped in this process. I also have friends in Spain, and I'm very familiar with those programs, and with Italy, which is changing rapidly and becoming really super, let's say, aggressive at bringing people in. So for my life in Santa Barbara, being pretty Mediterranean, it felt best to have kind of two places to land. The first one being Portugal for me, and a base for business in Switzerland, and and that's worked out so far really, really well. My son is in Switzerland in school, so for me, it's of course kind of natural. So, how do you do it? Well, the first step, as I say, determine which of those places. In my case, it was really down to just those three places. I like Croatia a lot as well, but they don't really have a program like yet, like Italy, Spain, and Portugal has. You don't have to be rich to do this. You don't have to buy a house or put $500,000 in some fund. It's really totally doable. As long as you follow the rules, and as long as you meet the minimum criteria they have. So I'll go forward with as much of that as I know, and I will help anybody interested. I've got friends that are attorneys and notaries and accountants and bookkeepers and all of that have made it really totally doable, for me. So, yeah. Let me talk about the positives a little bit and the negatives. So no matter whether, doesn't matter which place you choose, really. They all are, nothing's perfect, right? And I hit upon a little bit of some of the reasons I left the U.S. and what I tried hard to find, and in some ways have found the kind of opposite, which is what I was looking for. So goods and bads. The biggest good is if you have any sense of adventure, everything's new, right? Maybe you visited places before, but really living in those places, it's a whole other story. And good. So I have found in small countries, there's, believe it or not, an incredible sense of freedom. Now, there are lots of rules and very, very different from the US. For example, lots of border controls in terms of, are you a legal resident or are you not? So most of the places that I spend time in, they're all kind of islands in a way. I mean, there's not physical gates going between borders too much because it's all within this thing called the Schengen area. But there's kind of a virtual one, and the rules are different than Americans are used to. So, for example, you have to have a residence permit to stay longer than 90 days in any of these places. And then depending upon your citizenship, that means your passport you're carrying, right? You may or may not need visas. In the case of Americans, which is really my perspective, the issues are not really having a visa or not. You have a tourist visa that you can stay on for 90 days in any one part of Schengen. And then you have to leave outside of Schengen for another 90 days, basically, to meet that rule. But once you have your residence permit in one of these, in the places you choose, well, then you are officially a resident of the Schengen area. And then there are country rules, national rules, that also come into play, but are less, let's say, onerous. The Swiss are strict in that you can only be here for 90 days without a work permit, and you must leave. So you have Schengen rules, and then you have the national rules, right? So you have to follow each of those. There is this feeling of freedom, though, that I wanted to talk about. When the rules are being followed in a country, let's say less than 10 million, so in this case I'm really talking about Portugal, there's this feeling, I can't, everyone has an ID card, a national ID card, has a picture on it. For the most part, you use that all the time. You don't even really need a passport when you're moving even between European countries much. I guess as a rule, an American should probably keep it, but if you were a European citizen, you really just need your ID, your residence permit. So the good thing, freedom, in a strange way, following rules, understanding that there's not much crime, I found to me an incredible relief of stress, of not having to look behind my head. Is there someone on the 405 freeway that's going to crash into me? Am I going to have some unwanted lawsuit? Is the car going to be destroyed? There's a different mentality. And also the public transport is so good. You have, I can't express enough the lack of stress that's found in actually not fighting traffic. Strange, who would have never would have really thought it? It was like death by a million needles, right? The 405 again. So a great positive for me is the sense of freedom. And I guess the other one that goes with that is security. So in each cases here, also in the countries that I speak about, there is not a two political party system. There's like 4 or 5, right? and so lots of people have their say. There may well be multiple left-leaning parties, Communist Party, Socialist Party, but then there are maybe 2 or 3 right-leaning parties and 2 or 3 in the center. So somehow, some way, people seem to debate and learn from each other. And in the cases so far, in my last 4 years, they seem to reach agreement. COVID has thrown in a big monkey wrench, right? And everything changed, and so freedom, security, stability, in my case, in my opinion, has also been a really positive thing. I haven't witnessed racial hatred. I suppose there's still tribal things deep in all of us, and I'm sure it exists, but I really haven't seen. Certainly, I've witnessed xenophobia and things like that, but especially in smaller countries, there's this huge, strong feeling of community, and it's that community to me that actually like rises above. And it really is true that in many cases, people would rather talk about football or participate, right? Or ride a bicycle or just be out at the cafe talking about whatever. So it's a different kind of culture that I find less black and white and more open to different ideas. Lots of tradition, of course, and deeply rooted family ties. So I kind of think here, maybe they don't take the politics as seriously, or maybe they long ago, realized that politicians were more or less second-class citizens, and they just kind of said, well, I'm going to enjoy my life and my own life and my own community. Anyway, I'm still processing all of that stuff. Positives then. Of course, learning something new at any age, to me, is really positive, and language skills that slowly come, or fast if you're really good at that. For me, it's slow going. I also have found where I am, there's plenty of English spoken, and it's nice if you at least try and your vocabulary grows and grows in those other languages. And it also just makes you more, I don't know, maybe more assimilated, right? And you feel a part of something. There's something else that's very positive, then I'll move to the negatives, I guess. There's this thing that happens here that it's hard for me to really explain so much. I guess it's community. And I guess it's from thousands of years of maybe what was first a little castle or something someplace, or a little commune, as they call them, or a little department or a little area, basically your neighborhood, kind of like Brooklyn or Queens or something. Here it is so much about the neighborhood and about the community. And you start realizing that saying they, for example, like, who's they really? Here it's more about, first it's like we, and then it's like us. And so there's some sort of this invisible kind of inclusive thing that I find that feels like everyone's more or less on the same bus. And therefore you don't really want it covered with graffiti, and you don't want it scarred with knives, and you want to be able to sit, and you want it clean, and you want it safe. For example, on the bus, most cases people, I'd say half the people say buongiorno, to the driver, or thank you when they get off to the driver. There's this feeling that we're all in something together. And in my lifetime, maybe my parents' lifetime, maybe they felt that during the war in the United States, but in my lifetime, we felt it a little bit in Santa Barbara with close friends, and of course, but somehow it just wasn't the same. Somehow there's this sense of we that becomes us, and not me so much. it's a funny, for me, that's a positive. Okay, negatives. Missing family and loved ones and friends, that's a negative for sure. Thank God Zoom exists and some at least FaceTime or whatever, and we can talk. And so I talk to family at least once a week. I wish I spoke to my friends in America more often, but they have their lives, and I suppose I have mine. I have found that friends of mine from far away, I have a great friend, Pierre, in South Africa, and we talk right all the time. So somehow distance fades away. In fact, maybe even talk more than in the past. Maybe that's a function of COVID too. So missing those that have been important in your life is something, but it takes effort, and when you take the effort to stay in touch, things still, it's like you just left. So negatives. Well, if you chose the right places and you planned well enough, you could avoid the big negatives of, oh my God, what happened to my budget? Or how am I going to do this on a fixed income or whatever? So fortunately for me, that has not been the case. It's incredibly less expensive to live over here, amazingly less expensive, relative to, say, California. And so I have friends all over the U.S., so I guess each community is different. Negatives. Negatives for an American are that lots of new tools, for example, with banking or with paying your bills. And each country is different for sure. My business is, or the business I co-founded long ago, and I'm an advisor to now, it's based in Switzerland, so the Swiss rules apply. And so I'm not allowed to be a director of a business, and I'm not allowed to really sign anything. I'm allowed to be an advisor, but that's a function really of my American passport, I would say. In the case of Portugal, where I live, you're allowed to have, of course, you need to have a bank account, and you really must have a bank account. So you end up paying your bills electronically mostly. They, of course, don't have checks, no checks ever. So, I mean, checks like written bank checks. So you pay your bills through IBAN transfers, which is a function of every company or every service has a bank number, and kind of like an ABA number in the US, but more like an account number in the US. And you either just have this, if you pay a lot of bills, they give you a little scanner thing and you just run it across the IBAN number and it just pays the bill. There are also, you just, of course, type in the IBAN number on the web and it goes. I've not had any security issues, no problems with that. It's easy and painless. But it is learning something brand new that you've never really knew before. Negatives, there's bureaucracy to deal with, of course. And since you're an expat coming into a new place, you're not really a part of the mainstream of people that grew up, like we can navigate the DMV very well from California. Over here, there's a lot more rules that you have to follow. So bureaucracy is a negative, less so in Switzerland, more so in Portugal, and probably way more so in Italy. And I'm not sure about Spain, probably similar or somewhere in the middle of those two. But more negatives. Missing folks, bureaucracy. Of course, you wish you were fluent in the languages. That would make life easier. But I've not found that really to be anything other than a little bit of an embarrassment that I had already traveled most of my life and I'd lived in Italy before. So I'm embarrassed that my Italian is not better. It's okay though, especially if I'm in a taxi cab or someplace where they only speak Italian. But being lazy and English speakers everywhere, you got to work harder at consciously saying, I'm going to learn the language. But I'm confident people live here forever not learning the language, which kind of sucks. I think as a part of being the community, you should speak the language. Other negatives. When I'm traveling, when I'm out of Portugal, the food is expensive in Switzerland, especially at restaurants. However, when I compare a pizza diavolo here with we'd say pepperoni pizza in Santa Barbara, it's between 10 and 15 bucks here, which I think now is probably similar. I know inflation has kicked in a lot in the US, but I kind of think that it's similar at a pizzeria. Beers or a Coke might be $3, a beer might be $3 or $5, a cocktail might be 10 or 15 bucks. But if it's just you and another person, I would say expect 50 bucks for a meal, right, for both of you. In Portugal, it's not the case. So the food is a negative in terms of pricing, at least when I'm not in Portugal. Another negative is actually the food itself. I miss In-N-Out. I miss, great Mexican food. It's really hard to find over here. I would say the best I found is in Barcelona, and an incredible burrito in Croatia, in Hvar Island, and in Split. So of all that, I really miss the Mexican food. So food is kind of a negative. Portuguese food is different. You grow the taste. Incredibly great restaurants over there at good prices. Great wine, incredible. More negatives. Missing folks, whole expense in some cases. Frustration comes from some things being harder, but the trade-offs are small. Are great. In other words, it's kind of a small inconvenience. Where I go, there really is no crime. I don't find any real social, disintegration. Health insurance is an incredible positive in that, like at my age now, I'm about to turn 65. Health insurance in Portugal is basically free. I chose private insurance, so that just means I go to private hospitals and clinics and things that just have less people in them. I think plenty of the doctors there work in both places. They work publicly and privately, so it's more or less the same doctors, I think. And I have to say, my experience in the hospital, because there was one time I got sick and I needed to go, and it was great. The Portuguese doctor was just magnificent. He shows this iPad and he goes over this X-rays and he goes, well, this and this and this, and I have some lower back disc problem, and he goes, so you basically need to build up your abdomen, man, and it won't hurt. No more burgers. Go live your life in a healthy way. He was terrific. And it costs like 20 bucks or something like that. So my private insurance cost me around 150 bucks a month, I think. And I was thinking about that compared to Social Security or Medicare that would happen when I'm 65. I guess I would be paying more than that for the little donut hole or whatever you call it, the stuff that's missed. So healthcare by far is just great. So I think that really covers the negatives, to be honest. The positives far outweigh the negatives for me, with the exception of the deep-rooted missing, of the hole in your life from, I miss my sister and my friends and so forth. But I'm happy, I found the kind of freedoms that I wanted. And the civility that I wanted, and the kind of healthy discourse that I wanted. Okay, so that's an overview of positives and negatives from my perspective of leaving the United States and coming to Europe as an expat. I guess you would have similar experiences if you chose Italy, Spain, or Portugal, or yeah, those three. Um, I'll go over now the just the kind of process. So first and foremost, after you've chosen where you want to be, you need to obtain your residency permit. Much of that has to happen from your home country. So if you live in LA, you need the Portuguese embassy, which is in San Francisco. I think there is an Italian embassy and a Spanish embassy both in LA. So if you live in Southern California, you go there. You must apply for your residency permit there. You can't go on a vacation and say, oh, by the way, while I'm over here, I'm going to go make this application. Doesn't work that way. You really need to do it from your home country. In my case, I coordinated everything through the San Francisco embassy, and then in my specific case, because of my son being Colombian, I am also a Colombian resident. And so in that way, when the San Francisco embassy was really crowded, I could utilize the Colombian embassy, the Bogota embassy. And they were incredibly wonderful for me. So you basically make this application once you've found the place you feel you want to be. Most Americans choose Spain, Italy, or Portugal, I guess, especially most Californians. So you make your application. There are prerequisites for each country that are different. The Portuguese one, you kind of need to make the decision of, do you want to go now? Like right now, you want to go within the next few months and you want to live in another place. You want to move, in my case, to Portugal. If you choose that, then the road is simple. I chose something called a D7 visa, and I'll put up a video of my attorney talking about all the details of these. And yes, I wouldn't do it on your own. If I were you, I would use an attorney. It's not that expensive. Attorneys and doctors outside of the U.S., I think a Portuguese doctor might make, $50,000 a year, and an attorney, the average attorney probably is making $50,000 also in Portugal. The partners or the higher level folks with large, businesses, they're making commensurate, I suppose, with U.S. Scenarios, making a lot of money. But it's a lot of work. So kudos. I was always taught never cut costs on an accountant or an attorney. You need the best advice you can afford. So, in my case, I did a D7 visa, which meant I had to show, if I recall, roughly $12,000 or $15,000 a year in passive income. The more the better. Usually that is made up in the form of a Social Security, we call Social Security, the Social Security check the system we paid into all of our lives. Over here they call it a pension, but could be a government pension, meaning you were a teacher for the state, or you worked for the Fed, or you worked for some city. They call those government pensions over here. Government pension works fine, or a private or a normal, let's say, non-government Social Security check that you get every month, or rental from an apartment, or royalties from music or art or author or books you might have written. Anything that's passive, basically. And That's because they don't want you to have a job, lose the job, and basically go on asking for welfare. They want new people to come in, bringing new money, paying the rent, buying homes or renting homes, and so forth. So what I just described would apply to most retired American workers that would be making in the neighborhood of 12,000 to 15,000 in passive income. If you have that, it's pretty damn easy. You basically have to prove you have it. So a letter from the Social Security Administration, bank statements, you have to do that. You need a criminal report that's clear. You had to be a good person, a good dude. However, I don't know how critical they are. If you had some minor problems with the law, or maybe major ones long before, I don't know. Mine was clear, so it was easy sailing. Bank statements, proof of income, criminal report. What else? Bank statement. I think you had to prove that you didn't. You were just a citizen in good standing, basically, and I think that was about it. And then you have to have insurance. Health insurance, so that in case you croak and they know where to send the body, basically, and in case you get sick, or you're going to be all right. So and you have to have a bank account there in Portugal. So when I opened the bank account, I found a great bank, and also as a general rule, as a U.S. person, you shouldn't have more than $8,000 or $9,000. You really can't have more than $10,000 in the bank or in a financial instrument, unless then there's special things you have to fill out, which is it's not the end of the world, but you have to fill those out. So I opened a bank account, and at the bank they offer you insurance. I did a little research and I found a different approach and worked for me. So I did get life insurance from the bank, which was very affordable, and some travel insurance. But the other insurance I got was with a group they have over there called AFPOP. And it's like it's kind of like Auto Club for expats. And I guess the British set this up mostly because they were such early expats in Portugal. So that was very helpful. I got insurance through those guys. So bank account, insurance, you have to get a tax number. All that happens. Either your attorney can do it for you, or it happens when you are there. So you make the application at your home country. You get permission, or you use your attorney to open the bank account and the insurance, etc. In my case, I got permission. Anyway, I was there to accomplish it in person. And then basically a few months later, you get a notice if you were accepted. And if you are accepted, you get this, you have to give them your passport. They put a visa in your passport. That's kind of a 4-month visa to basically go there and find an apartment, get a lease, or buy a place. And then you show up at a government office, the immigration office, more or less, and you show the lease. You show up in person. You have all your biometrics, it's called. So basically, you give them everything you need to get this residence card, photograph, data, approval of all the things that you would have submitted in the past, and then you have 1 year as a kind of first year temporary resident to live your life and set up your life. That also gives you freedom in Schengen to travel. And then you've accomplished this main limitation on travel, the Schengen requirements. And then depending upon where you go, each country has their own rules. Mostly they're 90-day rules, meaning 3 months in Portugal, setting up your apartment, then maybe going traveling around Europe, maybe 3 months in Italy, or 3 months in Spain, or 3 months in Switzerland, but you have to be sure that you're not out of Portugal for very long. There are some rules there. I try to remember how long it is. I think you certainly can't be out for more than 6 months, and so it's important to always keep Portugal your base. So this is my experience. It's not as hard as anyone would guess obtaining that residence permit, as long as you have that passive income in my case. The second road forward is if you don't want to move right away and you want to, let's say, a plan B. So many people that want to plan Bs, they want that residency and the right to be there in a moment's notice, let's say, but they don't want that requirement of being there for 6 months. So they usually follow the golden visa approach, where that requires you to invest. I don't know what the minimum is now. Maybe it's €250,000 or something, but it's and I think that's for a house that maybe needs rehab. So there are 3 types of golden visas relative to property. There's probably more now, but in general, I think it's still the same. You invest cash in the purchase of a building. I think it can be a commercial building, but it also can, of course, be your own home to live in. And that gives you, in exchange for that investment, that gives you, I think you only have to be there like 2 weeks every 2 years, maybe. So that's kind of your plan B that you can like turn on whenever you want. So if things get really bad in wherever you may live and you want to bail, then you have that option. And plenty of people do that. Most of my friends have done the D7 because you kind of like the flexibility a little bit, regardless of how much dough you might have and where you want to invest it. Maybe I think Portugal is a great place to invest, especially in real estate, because you don't know how long these programs are going to last. And I know my attorney and other attorneys, they are busy all the time, and huge numbers of Americans, lots from San Francisco, lots of Californians, kind of seeking a new California. So those are the 2 main ways to get to Portugal as a resident. I chose the D7 and the option A, move right away, because I wanted to be close to my kid. And that worked out great. COVID has made everything more complicated, but we all do the best we can with that. And now I think that is waning as we come into the 3rd or 4th wave, whatever it is, this winter. It seems to be easier. Now over here we have COVID certificates. So it's this barcode on your not on your passport, but it's kind of a passport in your phone. And you basically, if in Italy right now, you can't go into a restaurant really and eat unless you show this thing. And when you're crossing borders, each country has their own rule. There are COVID rules, which of course are, are the prerequisite. I guess most people this winter are going to be staying put in one place or another, just to avoid the infection. Yeah, as an American, immediately, I 4 years ago, I would say, oh man, I'm a passport to take a vaccination. What, are you crazy? And I would feel an affront to my personal, civil liberties or something. But something really changed for me over these years. And this thing about the me did become more about the us. And I still believe in personal freedom. I mean, come on. I'm an old motorcycle racer, and so. But all I can say is the edge is kind of taken off by kind of, maybe it's good book stuff, or you love your neighbor. I walk down the street and it's buongiorno Ricky or bon dia, or so there's this different feeling of community that comes in the old world that we don't have. And maybe it's just California. Maybe if you're in North Carolina or in the South, and maybe you still have that, but not so much in California from my experience. Well, that's probably enough of this first. Hopefully that was informative, and maybe some, at least my friends that are thinking about coming over here, can find some answers to questions there. Anyway, now it's lunchtime. See you guys later. Ciao.